Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. It's a podcast with you in mind. My name is Tony Roy. I'm your podcast host as well as a professional pickleball coach. In this special episode of the podcast, we interview Jenna Spears. Jenna Spears is a pickleball player, a pickleball coach, and a pickleball promoter. In this episode, Jenna shares with us her path to where she is currently as a pickleball player, coach, and promoter. And importantly, as a listener, what you can take away from this podcast are the aha moments that helped Jenna along her way, and an understanding that by some dedication and some focus to your pickleball, you too can advance as a player and as a consumer of pickleball, right? As a person who has a relationship with the sport, you can greatly grow in the game regardless of your background, as long as you apply yourself to the sport. Look for those aha moment opportunities and continue to work on your game. Before we jump into my conversation with Jenna, if you're looking for some training opportunities, some awesome training opportunities, we have opened up our camps in Dallas in November, as well as our camps in Tampa in January are open for enrollment. So if you're ready to take that step and join CJ and me out on the pickleball court, make sure you check out those camps. I'll put it down in the show notes. Right now, let's jump into my conversation with Jenna Spears. Enjoy the conversation. It's my pleasure to have with us Jenna Spears. I've known Jenna for a number of years as a pickleball player, now as a pickleball business owner and a pickleball coach. Jenna was one of our original students inside the pickleball system, the first iteration of the pickleball system. And I had the pleasure of working with Jenna in a video analysis back in the day. Jenna, welcome to the Pickleball Therapy Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jenna, you and I were chatting a little bit before the beginning of our recording, and I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about your journey as a pickleball player. Tell us a little bit about your background before you started playing pickleball, and then a little bit about how you got into pickleball and played pickleball.
Sure. So my sports background is mostly softball and a little bit of rec volleyball. So maybe some basement ping pong, not a ton of paddle sports, never played tennis. And back when pickleball was first becoming popular, mostly in Florida and California, my uncle had a spot in California, and he kind of took it back with him, was building a house and put it in his front yard, put a court in his front yard. And we were all like, pickleball, what is this? we were like, what is this sport? And so we started playing just occasionally and kind of just hammered the ball at each other. We didn't really know what we were doing. And my dad started getting a little bit more into it and started playing in more rec facilities that were in the area. And then as my youngest was about ready to go off to school. I'll go off to kindergarten. So I was going to be at home for not have the kids at home for the first year in several years. And I said to my dad, I was like, do you think they'd let me come play with you guys over it was the Lakeshore Athletic Center at the time. Do you think they'd let me go play with you? And so he was like, yeah, I think so. Kind of nervous about it. And so I went and I had a lot of fun and I kept going. I ended up taking some lessons from my now business partner's parents. They still teach lessons there actually, but I took some beginner lessons and got a little strategy in my game. And then their son ended up kind of taking me under his wing and kind of showed me some more advanced strategy, showed me third shot drops. And yeah, he ended up becoming my business partner, and he sold his facility kind of just right after COVID. And we enjoyed teaching lessons together and found that a lot of people actually like doing like a 2-on-2 lesson. So we do a lot of that. Yeah, we got asked to do programming for our local rec departments. And so now we have 4 kind of local rec departments, and we run clinics, lessons, and leagues for our area. We run drop-in lessons. We run tournaments kind of on the side as
So
well.
it sounds like you're running the gamut now, Jenna, from the beginning of pickleball, like what's pickleball out in my uncle's front yard, to
Yes.
now I'm running tournaments and all over the place, which is awesome. And the reason I wanted to set that out is because I know we're going to talk a little bit more about, we're going to dive into your journey a little bit more in terms of aha moments you've had and things like that, both as a player and as a coach, and now as a coach. But I think what's important for players listening to this episode of the podcast, is to understand the baseline, right? So like where did Jenna come from in her relationship with pickleball? It's not like, you were born, an awesome pickleball player and strategist and all that stuff. And to see how those aha moments impacted your play. And what I'd like to do, if we can, is let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned to me before we get started that that you have in fact listened to episodes of the podcast before, and there was an episode of the podcast that led to some mental development in your game. Let's talk a little about that, that micro journey within your bigger journey on the mental side of
Yes.
pickleball, and how that changed your approach.
hmm So I think it was an episode where you guys talking about a book, the mental and emotional training for tennis. And so I ended up buying that book, and it was just so, especially at the time that I was going through just that stage of growth where you know what you need to be doing, but you just don't have the skills to be able to like implement it all the time. And so just kind of like getting down on myself, like, why can't I do this all the time? And so it was very handy and applicable in those moments of growth, and just those reminders of you are good enough, and just go for it in rec play. But when it's tournament time, then you are, your mindset changes. And yeah, it was very good to read all those healthy reminders that you're good enough, you can do this, those things that you need to be saying to yourself in tournament. And so that when it comes down to it, you feel good about yourself enough to be able to implement what you've been working so hard on for the last several months.
Yeah,
Um,
we had a guest on who's he's a young man. He's a tennis and now pickleball instructor down in South Florida, and he has the concept about being your own coach, right? Like it's so important to learn to be your own coach, because when you're playing, you have to be your own coach, or else you're out there there's nobody helping you. You got to help yourself. So that's super cool. And the thing I want listeners to take away from this, other than just the general part of it, is it's part of your journey, right? So like, Coach Pete's book is an awesome book. You can find it in our resources. I'll put a link below to our resources page at betterpickleball.com, and his book is linked there. But his book is very digestible, because the chapters are 2, 3, sometimes maybe 4 pages at the most, and so there's no way you can't get to 3 pages in a sitting. And so it just
yes.
lets you really start that journey, and it just opens up a whole bunch of other things. And we're going to talk. Actually, let's segue into the other mental part, and then I know there's a on court tip that we're going to be talking about, something that was an aha moment for you, and then how, as a player and also as a coach. But let's talk about the I think you call them enneagrams or something like that. So like the personality,
Yes.
and that's another piece of understanding yourself on the court. Talk a little bit about that process.
Yes. So my mixed doubles partner at the time, he kind of actually brought me into you guys as well. But he was talking about enneagrams, and he had said, I want to understand where you go when you're frustrated. Like, what's your personality type? And then what the thing with the enneagrams is that based on your personality, you have these things where you go um, when you're in a good spot and when you're in a bad spot. And that's not to say that everybody falls into a
Right.
box, right? It's just like more common tendencies depending on your personality type. So I'm kind of a peacekeeper at heart, but I'm on the pickleball court, I'm a little bit strong-willed. and but it's just helpful to know, okay, when you're frustrated, you're going to go here, and when you're in a really good spot, you're going to be here. And then on the opposite side of that, understanding your partner, whether it's your men's partner, women's partner, mixed doubles partner. Okay, what's their personality type, and where are they going? Are they going inside their head where they where they need to be pulled out by somebody, or maybe they just need to work it out themselves, or maybe they're just so mad they need a timeout whether they want it or not. But you know it because you know their personality, right? So kind of understanding those things so that you're making judgment calls based on personality and where you know they are in that moment.
I think it's also helpful, Jenna, to know yourself a little better too, because
Yes.
understanding your own personality, and that was something that that really shone through at this year's pickleball summit that we hosted a couple months ago. Several of the pros, independent of each other, not on a panel or something where they're all agreeing with each other, totally independent presentations, touched on that subject. And one of our presentations was actually entitled "Knowing Your Pickleball ID," which that's part and parcel of that. It's like knowing that you're this, you like Sarah Minton was the pro who talked about it, and she was talking about how she likes order. She's
Yes.
Virgo, she's British, she likes everything to be step one, step two, everything. And she and I played mixed doubles together at the US Open and Senior Pro, and I'm more of a disruptor in the court. I'm more of a let's do this and see how this plays out. And actually, I'll tell you of a funny story that I don't think Sarah will mind that I share it, but we were playing in a very, very tense match in a good way, like a lot of tension on the court, but in a positive, like this is awesome, tension way.
Yes.
And there's a rally where I hit 4 baseline lobs in a row. Now, I think it's a fantastic strategy. I'm not going to get into the details of the strategy, but I like 4 lob shots in a row. I finally, we don't move forward on those, right? We stay back and I'm waiting for my spot. And I finally get the opening. I soften them up a little bit on one side, and I get the next ball and I drive it at the female player. It's mixed double, so I drive it at the female player. We move up. We got the NBZ. We're doing our dance up there. Probably like 7 shots later, 8 shots later, the male player, gets a ball, rips it towards my partner, kind of, catches her off guard. So we lose a rally, right? But to me, we did our job, right? It was a productive rally. We got to the NBZ. We were on the serve team, obviously. We were back to start. We made it to the NBZ line. I'm like, everything's good, right? This is a positive rally. And Sarah hated the rally, hated it. Like she was like, and she turns to me and she goes, like, why'd you allow 4 times? There's one of the few, like I generally keep my cool out there. I called the timeout. I was like, I kind of flicked my paddle out of my hand to the ground. I was just pissed. I was like, and I turned to her. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I know you didn't. I guess you didn't like the lobs. That's okay, but it's like I'm working on it, and it actually it was up later and they worked great. But I'm just like, it was part of but it's the way that I see the game. And what's interesting, going back to what you said about the enneagrams, had I had a better understanding of how her brain processes information at that moment, then I would have been able to better understand her perspective, because she's like, I've submerged her in a world of chaos, right? And she's trying to work through this world of chaos that I'm working through just fine. So I think the Enneagram thing is a really interesting way of doing that. And by the way, real quick, is it okay for me to ask who your mixed doubles partner is?
My mixed doubles partner, yeah. So it was Brian at the time.
Is Brian the person who introduced you to us?
Yes.
So I'm gonna turn to the camera. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna turn to the camera. Was Brian both times, or is this a different mixed doubles partner? The Enneagram.
With the Enneagrams, it was Brian, and my mixed up doubles partner as of late is named Ryan. So anyway.
But I'm gonna turn to the camera real quick. Brian, thank you very much. And it's not thank you for me, it's thank you for Jenna, for introducing her to us. So
there you go.
Do that real quick. All right, so let's talk a little bit about let's segue here to the process. It's still mental pickleball therapy, how we see the game, but there was a video that you mentioned to me that you had watched where I think it was me talking about when you had a returner not making it all the way to the NBZ line, knowing that you could attack that returner in transition and then take advantage of it. Talk us through that aha moment that you had with that, and focusing more. The strategy's fine; it's good to know that, but focusing more on how it affected you and your relationship with pickleball and how you understood the game.
Well, I think it actually goes back to what you were just talking about with order, right? Like I love order, structure, predictability. Kind of a concept. But then when I'm watching this video about, okay, so I'm doing third shot drops every time, right? And I'm trying to implement this strategy, trying to do third shot drops, making something, putting a ball in the kitchen that it's not attackable for my opponents, right? And then I watch this video where, like, if somebody doesn't return and run, you get to fire that ball at their feet, and then it's like, wait, I don't have to do that every time. I don't have to do a third shot drop every time, you know? So just like those little baby steps of like, okay, this was a great strategy for right now, but you also have to pay attention to what's happening on the other side of the court. Oh, but don't forget the poach, because
Right.
if somebody's kind of creeping over, you got to watch for that
Yeah.
too, and then maybe you send it behind that person, right? So it's just a lot of those little step-by-step strategy pieces that you start looking to and build into your game, um, and you change some of those concepts of what you thought was what you had in your own mind of order, right?
Right.
and and that can be changed and mixed up and stirred a little bit, if you will. So
The
um
way we think about it, Jenna, maybe this will resonate, is when we do our camps and stuff, is like, like you see like a horse-drawn a carriage. Not that we're horses, but you'll get the idea. Horse-drawn a carriage. Sometimes they put those things on the side of their faces like blinders, so that
yes,
they're only focusing on like just the road, and they don't get distracted by the sides, right? And
yes,
I think most of us, myself included, when we start playing pickleball, we come into pickleball and this is all we can see. Is this really narrow space in front of us. And then as maybe like for you, it was like you heard that video that we were explaining that concept, and you were like, all of a sudden this blinder opened up, like, what? And then you start
yeah,
thinking about the poach or whatever. You're like, what? And then you're like, my partner's over here. And then eventually what's beautiful is, you start seeing like a 360 of pickleball, if you will, all the way around you. And it's a beautiful sport when you start seeing it that way. One thing that you
yes.
mentioned, and I'm going to go ahead and tee it up for you, because it's something that you said is a sweet spot for you guys in terms of you and your coaching partner now, that working with a lot of players. The concept of, and I may be using the term that you didn't use, but like purposefulness or intentionality when you're playing. Let's talk about that a little bit and how it can change a
Mm.
player's game.
Yeah. So our sweet spot really is like the 3035 player, and I love making people think. And that's something that I distinctly remember the day where I personally made a shot based on what my opponent was doing or where they were, instead of just getting the ball over the net. And I distinctly remember that. And we actually have students now who will be like, Jenna, I made a shot based on what I saw, not just reactive, right? So we really, that's our sweet spot, is making people think about what they're doing, not just getting the ball over the net, right? What's your purpose in this shot? What are your opponents doing? Where are they in the court? Did they forget to return and run? Because then you need to hammer it at their feet. Are they at the kitchen line established? Did they leave a hole where you can drive it down the middle? Right? What are they doing? And what is your best shot in any given
Mhm.
scenario? And we're all gonna mess up on it, right? But the point is that you start experimenting based on what you see, versus just being a reactive player and getting the ball back over the net, right? And I do think it's important to just get the ball back over
Yeah,
sometimes, right? If you're under stress,
right.
get the ball over the net, right? But when you are at a point where you are making shots based on what you're seeing your opponents do, that's my ultimate favorite thing. And that's what I love getting students to see and do, is when they're like, I did it.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's
my
amazing
favorite.
when you see that, when you see the blinders start falling off, or the
Yes,
the
the
shades opening up, and
blinders.
you're like,
Hmm.
and they start seeing the game differently. It's just and listen, I'm always like, players who hit the ball over the net don't generally listen to the Pickleball Therapy podcast. So, but if you're out there and you just enjoy hitting the ball over the net, knock yourself out. It's fine. As long as you're having a good time and you're just batting the ball around, great. Good for
Right,
you.
right.
Normally, players who listen to this podcast or who go to a Jenna training session are looking for more, and that's why we speak in these terms.
Yeah.
Jenna, I know that you're doing instruction up in the, I think it's like the sort of the middle western side of Michigan, right? So like on the west,
West
on the
Michigan.
West Michigan up there.
Yeah.
If a player is up in that area and wants to join one of your trainings, something like that, what's the best way? Or can they follow you on Instagram, or what's your thing? How do you like people to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, I have links on our website. Our business name is Promotion Pickleball. So promotionpickleball.com. You can find us through there, contact us, send me an email. We have a link to our little Facebook group where I post like tips and tricks of, sometimes people share videos, pros share videos, and I put it in there. Just little things that maybe we're working on, or it's our little student page. It's fun, but
Love
you
it.
can follow me
All
on
right.
social media or add me as a friend or whatever. So
Awesome. Jenna, really appreciate those tips. I mean, I think that just listen, if you're listening to this, start on your mental journey. The book that Jenna talked about is a fantastic, actually, I shouldn't say start on it, because you're listening to Pickleball Therapy. You're already on your journey.
we're
Let's
already on it.
strengthen
You're
your
right.
journey. Actually, I mean, honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're already well ahead of, the vast majority of not just pickleball players, of persons who are alive on the planet, not paying attention to the mental side. So congratulations on that.
So
But you
true.
can continue your journey by doing what Jenna said, or what Jenna did about, the book that she looked at. We'll put that down below. And then adding intentionality is such a beautiful way of, you're going to play better pickleball and just feel better out there. Jenna, I really appreciate your time and joining us for the Pickleball Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jenna Spears. I thank Jenna for sharing of herself with us so that we can continue to grow and learn as players. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review it. It helps us reach other players just like you who are interested in growing the mental side of their relationship with pickleball. And as always, if you enjoyed it, share it with your friends. Remember, if you enjoyed the podcast, they probably will too. Have a great week, and we'll see you at our regular episode this Friday.